Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
It is another hot one, 28th of February. We're recording on Monday for Tuesday, the 28th of February. I don't know, Pete, what do you reckon it was, or is? Is it 38, 40 degrees?
35, I believe.
35.
Yeah.
It's a dry heat, which is not bad because you don't get the humidity, which seems to make it a lot worse. But anyway, it's summer. Summertime. Congratulations to all of those recipients of awards and recognition. And remember, if you know somebody, and I'll bet you do, who should be recognised, nominate him or her for an Order of Australia. It's easy, and it's a very rewarding thing to do for them and for you. You know you've helped somebody to get some recognition for effort. My God, there are people who put in effort. They're unsung heroes and heroines of our society. But speaking of being recognised, Grace Tame. Grace Tame, the former Young Australian of the Year, and her disgraceful behaviour at Government House, we shall discuss later. Stay with us for that. Inflation figures are out this week. Most unlikely that the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia, will cut the interest rates next month on these numbers. But stay tuned. You never know. Stay tuned. The Australia Day demonstrations, yes, many and varied. I know it's rent a crowd, but it is a problem. I mean, visually and emotionally and spiritually, it's a problem. We've got to get rid of a lot of this stuff, the woke, the two flags, well, it's not two flags, it's three flags. Welcome to country, smoking ceremonies. It's all divisive and invented and confected nonsense. We are one nation. We have to become one nation. Australians are less, or Aboriginal Australians are less than 3% of the population. Some are underprivileged. Many are hugely successful. Doctors, lawyers, engineers, architects. There are some who would have to be regarded as a very indulged part of society, with advantages that are way out of proportion to their numbers and their situation. Talk to Warren Mundine if you don't believe me. These people, these disruptors, I mean, the protesters, they're not all Aboriginals. One or two perhaps, not that I'm counting, but they are agitators. I don't believe that these people work for a living. They're not contributors to society. Outrageous acts of vandalism, statues and monuments destroyed. Decolonisation is their war cry. Well, what the hell would they do without us, the Australian taxpayer? Which all originated, of course, back in the colonial days. The Australian worker who's carrying this country. This is not a logical protest. Everyone, of course, is entitled to protest. But this is the work of anarchists. They have no cause other than one of convenience. Their real cause is to destroy society upon which they are a burden. Aboriginals, land rights, the voice, colonisation. Can you think of any, Pete? Climate change?
Well, there's plenty, yes.
Yeah, ban fossil fuels. No to nuclear power. Free Palestine. Like we can free Palestine. What practical thing could we possibly do here in Australia to free Palestine, and what business is it of ours? gee whiz, common sense has to somewhere along the way prevail. The ABC on Sunday, that's the Australia Day morning, listed all of the Aboriginal Australia Day events. Invasion Day, Survival Day. No, these weren't celebrations, these were events or protests. Did the ABC promote any of the mainstream Australian Day or Australia Day celebrations? No, they didn't. Which for the national broadcaster is a disgrace. They covered selectively all sorts of different things. The awards, yep. While I'm on that subject, the awards I mean, Sam Newman got into terrible trouble for what the Daily Mail described as an astonishing act of disrespect. He was at Government House in Melbourne for an Australia Day function. It was last Wednesday. And they started off with an acknowledgement to country. And Sam immediately got up and walked to the door. He thus kept his back to the stage and therefore the Governor of Victoria. Shock horror. I wasn't there, so I don't know the real context of what happened, but I don't think you can actually get up and walk out without turning your back on the people who are in front of you. So I really don't know what the problem was. But quite frankly, I have done just exactly that myself. He goes a bit further and says people should boo and slow clap and whatnot. I don't. I just get up and leave because I won't be part of any of that rubbish. I regard it as my right to walk out. I'm not disrespecting anything, but I will not be part of nonsense. Ernie Dingo, who invented this stuff as a joke, must be killing himself with laughter. I'll bet he's saying to himself, if I had patented this or copyrighted it or something and charged every time they did it, they'd have to pay me. They probably would. I tell you what, Ernie, they probably would. It's okay to make a point. Get up and walk out of anything you want to walk out of. I personally believe that this coming election should be a referendum on nonsense and ending it. Welcome to country, 3 flags, smoking ceremonies. Now, we can make the point. One nation and one flag. A nation which refuses to be divided by race or religion or anything woke. Sam Newman annoyed the Daily Mail even further by slamming Telstra's dedicated Indigenous call line. Yes, you heard me right. Telstra's dedicated Indigenous call line. Apparently Telstra have installed a button for you to press if you identify as an Aboriginal and want to skip the queue. Don't want to be kept waiting? Press the button. Why wouldn't everyone press the button? And how can you possibly have a special call centre policy for one race and not everybody? Sorry, Telstra, I agree with Sam Newman 100%. We all want to be fast-tracked. Nothing to do with race or colour. Thank you very much. Just get on with it. Put us through. It's your job. The New Look USA Trump, or I suppose you'd call it, I don't know what you'd call it. Is it not a revolution? Not quite, but he's not letting the grass grow under his feet. Out are the WHO, the World Health Organization, the Paris Climate Agreement, taxes on tips. I think that's... Pete, what do you reckon?
Oh, I think it's a good idea.
Why would you tax a waiter's tips?
Oh, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Petty.
Yeah.
And yet you've got multi-billionaires who transfer their money out of the country and never pay a cent. But you tax the waiters? Taxes on tips? Well, that's gone. DEI under Trump is gone. This is the diversity, equity, inclusion stuff. Oh, God. Well, that's gone anyway. In are the best person for the job, America first, tax cuts, if I can remember all of these, a national emergency on the southern border, a drill baby drill policy, which is their new energy policy, only 2 genders. Wow, pretty good, Don.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Pretty good, male and female. It is amazing, isn't it? In years to come, people will laugh over all of this stuff. Donald Trump, it sounds pretty good to me. I just wish you could have done one thing further and ditched the UN as well. It seems President Trump's most controversial suggestion that just because your baby is born in the USA, he or she will not automatically become an American citizen. The old policy, which was clearly attracting illegal immigrants, people would know that if they could just have a baby on American soil, they would be pretty much guaranteed that their family could stay. So it's obvious and reasonable to take the sugar off the table. I know there'll be constitutional issues with that, but you know, I think he's absolutely right. The USA have a huge trade surplus with us, so it's most unlikely that any trade sanctions or any trade consequences of the new policy will affect us. Yet it's hard to imagine any country not having a trade surplus with Australia, since we gave away all our manufacturing industry, thanks to the Labor government back in 1975. Gave it away, yep. Which makes a sick joke of the expensive Future Made in Australia campaign. You've heard about it. They're spending a lot of money on advertising it. Can we have just one journalist ask, why is the manufacturing of our future important now? Why wasn't it then? Think how much further we could be ahead without Whitlam and his It's Time government. It's time for what? Labor and the unions are for this whole thing. Huge loss of jobs and opportunity. Can you imagine a trade union being for a huge loss of jobs and opportunity? But straight-faced, these guys, government, Labor government today, they talk about the future made in Australia. What a joke. I can see why people might be a little bit angry about Trump saying, you know, make your product in America or suffer a tariff. But when you think about it, he's absolutely right. Perfectly right. In dramatic contrast to the Lima Declaration. I don't know, I've done this before, but I'm sort of tempted to do it again. I have done it, and you can Google it. Just Google it. For example, what can you tell me about the Lima Declaration?
According to Parliament of Australia, in 1975, the Whitlam government signed the United Nations Lima Declaration, through which the Australian government sold out Australian industries and workers by specifically agreeing to transfer manufacturing to third world countries, supposedly to help them develop.
That's not me. That's history. In 1975, the Whitlam government signed the United Nations Lima Declaration, through which the Australian government sold out, their words, sold out the Australian industry and workers by specifically agreeing to transfer manufacturing to third world countries, supposedly to help them develop. This guy was not the Prime Minister of the third world. He was supposed to be looking after us, like these guys in Canberra today are supposed to be looking after Australia, and they're not. They're more concerned about the world and strutting the stage. Please, just Google and ask that question. What can you tell me about the Lima Declaration? And keep remembering it, because I think it's terribly important not to let that just slide through, because no one can remember it. Certainly no journalist that I know. Be careful who you vote for. Be very careful who you vote for. Victoria, in the hands of Labor for I don't know how many years, most of the last 30 years, Victoria leads the nation in the rate of collapsing businesses. What an accolade. Bankruptcies, Victoria recorded the largest increase in business insolvencies in the nation. Up 71% compared to just 1 year ago. According to the Herald Sun, Victorian businesses are collapsing at an alarming rate due to cost of living pressure, state government taxes and a general rundown of the economy. Hardest hit, restaurants and bars. And the NAB, National Australia Bank survey released on the weekend confirms these grim statistics. In fact, I think they're probably worse, according to the NAB survey. A $2 billion boost to the aluminium industry. The centre of interest is Newcastle. The Hunter, a vital seat for Labor to win, which is certainly in play. $2 billion to be given to the largest user of electricity in Australia in green credits. This is to encourage this company to use renewable electricity, which is probably incapable of generating enough heat to produce aluminium anyway. But to hell with that. The current policies of Labor would destroy the industry and cost thousands of jobs and, of course, lose the safe Labor seat. So, what's the solution? Give $2 billion of taxpayers' money to bribe the company into going along with Labor's impossible green dream. It's called buying your way into government, or trying to, with our money. I don't know what you think about that. The South Australian government, while we're on the subject, has asked the official regulator, electricity regulator, AEMO, for permission to recommission 2 diesel generators because of a perceived and anticipated shortfall in the system's ability to supply electricity using alternatives that's being provided and indeed probably insisted upon by this government. Federal and state, they seem to be determined to die in a ditch along with their climate policy. If you look at the latest polls, it's obvious that Labor will lose the coming election federally. But like The Voice, they just can't stop the nonsense. They're in denial. And Albanese is on the nose. We'll see. I've seen it happen so many times in so many different places. Big companies, small companies, political parties, yes, department stores, even radio stations. Oh yes. They all should be in touch with their public opinion, their customers. Highly paid executives, no excuses. They stuff everything up. Look at this. Once the most trusted names in Australia, Coles and Woolworths. They are now the least trusted brands in the country. It's a salutary lesson. Think of the money that it costs to rebuild a brand, like Qantas, for example. All their own work, of course. But what it's cost them? Unbelievable. Just a little prevention is worth so much more than an expensive cure. Now, please help me with this. Have you heard one word of criticism uttered by the United Nations or any human rights and equal opportunity person or group or people with regard to the Taliban and their continuing institutionalized discrimination and cruelty to women and girls in Afghanistan? Girls can have a primary school education and that's all. That would take them to 9, which is the legal age where a girl can get married. That is legalised child abuse. Not a word from the United Nations, however, or Grace Tame. We'll get to her. Then there are all the restrictions that are placed on those children's lives as they move through adolescence and womanhood, their appearance and their behaviour. They can't do this, they can do that, they can't do this. It's extraordinary, and it's on an industrial scale. Half the population is affected. An abuse of human rights at the highest level. The United Nations, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, never says anything apart from his usual climate crap. And we pay somewhere, I think it's about $97 million a year to be part of this useless organisation. And if we're part of that organisation, we're part of their mistakes as well as everything else. Every year, they are a disgrace. They should be dumped. As I said earlier, Trump exited, fired the World Health Organization. I really wish he'd do the same to the United Nations. And I wish we had a government that had the sort of courage to say the things that I'm saying to you here. But for some reason, I don't know, they don't want to frighten the horses, or they don't want to rock the boat, or they don't want to offend anyone. I'm sorry. I suppose that's why I like Trump. He has the courage of his convictions, whether he's a bull in a china shop or not. All right, let's get to it, huh? Australian of the Year. Lots of worthy people. They were all paraded. It was well covered by the national broadcaster in all its political correctness, but all the recipients worthy and good people. Great.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
It's tame, not one of them. Can you imagine wearing a T-shirt to Government House to an official government reception? Wearing a T-shirt to a Government House reception, let alone one that was emblazoned with, and yes, I'm going to use the word, emblazoned with "fuck Murdoch." What a brat. What a disgrace. You could say a disgrace tame, I guess. I mean, it was a disgrace. Even if she was a former Young Australian of the Year. But just to shift my criticism a bit, there is no way Grace Tame wearing a T-shirt, or that T-shirt, should have been let into that function. The prime ministerial minders, of whom there are many, at our expense, should have stopped her at the door. To have allowed her to be presented to the Prime Minister of Australia, let alone photographed beside him, is ridiculous. I don't know what I would have done. I sometimes when I talk to you about these things, I think to myself, what would I have done in that situation? You know what I've done? I would have either turned my back on her, or I'd have grabbed her by the scruff of the neck and I'd have marched her out the door and closed it behind her. Allowing that girl in that T-shirt with that comment to become a billboard to attack one of the, you might not find him perfect, I mean his son sacked me. I've got no flag to wave for Rupert Murdoch, but I respect him. You might not like his newspapers, but he is a great Australian. You'd have done all of this, unless, of course, you agree with her protest. And then you'd have let it go through to the keeper just like they did. I don't know, Peter, have I got any time?
Yeah.
Peter Clayton behind the camera on a very hot, well, it's going to be a hot week, isn't it, the whole thing? But it's a lovely, lovely summer day, and I hope it's a good one for you. One more thing I want to talk to you about. The line caught my ear. Let's get out of here in one piece. Let's get out of here in one piece. The words of one of the victims of this guy, he was a masseur, a practitioner, a therapist, somebody who does therapeutic massages. In all honesty, a woman goes into a suburban home, an ordinary suburban home, not a surgery or anything, takes off all her clothes, alone, no chaperone, lies on a table, and lets a total stranger massage her naked body. I don't understand that at all, but what I really don't understand is one of the victims saying on television, when talking about the experience, which is no longer before the court, her only idea was to get out of there in one piece. Her only idea was to get out of there in one piece. Okay, well, that I understand. Can you tell me why some of these women went back 3,457 times? 3,457 times. What? What am I missing? It doesn't really make any sense. The moment somebody touches your body in a way that doesn't please you without your approval, you call the police. You don't make another appointment. Perhaps you could enlighten me. Or maybe this is another one of my Brittany Higgins moments, for which I will be in total regret for the rest of my life. I don't think so. Take responsibility. Anyway, call me around the dining room table on the 7th of February. We'll be back then live streaming 9 to 12, jeremycordeaux.com, with the best wishes of the Rising Sun Inn at 60 Bridge Street, Kensington, and Jim Elder Fine Art Gallery in Melbourne Street, North Adelaide. 106 to 110, two separate buildings, beautiful, beautiful buildings. And you can talk to Jim Elder and his lovely wife Helen on 08 8267 2869. And this is his last, what do you call it, exhibition, which was just fantastic. I must admit, he's got 4 this coming year, which I'll have the opportunity to tell you about. But there's if you happen to be in the neighbourhood of Melbourne Street, North Adelaide, it really is interesting. There's a big picture of one of the very successful sales that he made out of that particular catalogue. It was a Hans Hyson, and he sold it, I think it went overseas, for $125,000. So if you have a painting and you're wondering what it's worth, you could be sitting on a fortune. I mean, it could be a painting you don't even like. It might be wise to check out Jim Elder or Helen. Now, what can I tell you about the day? And Pete, I didn't bring my glasses. 1819, Sir Stamford Raffles lands in Singapore. What a man he was. Raffles Hotel. Have you ever been there, Pete?
Yes, I have, yes.
Did you have one of the gin slings?
No, I was certainly a teetotaler in those days.
Yeah, well, it is something. He must have been quite a man. Charity single, We Are the World, recorded by a supergroup of US talent for Africa. There was Michael Jackson, there was Lionel Richie, Quincy Jones, Bruce Springsteen, Stevie Wonder and other pop stars on this day in 1985. We Are the World. London's Pall Mall, the first street to be lit with gaslight. The first gaslit street. 1807 was the year, and this was the day. Peter Cosgrove, well, he was General Sir Peter Cosgrove. Talked to him many times. He was a lovely guy. He was a Governor General of Australia, but before that he was a very impressive Supreme Commander of our armed forces. Peter Cosgrove, 2014, is named the Governor General of Australia. Very worthy. Henry Morton Stanley. Henry Morton Stanley, he was a Welsh journalist and African explorer. He is the one who found Livingstone. True. Livingstone, I presume. He was born in Wales on this day in 1841. Construction began on the first private thorium-uranium nuclear reactor. What do you reckon the date was, Pete?
1945.
No, 1958. I tell you what, that's a tried and true technology, isn't it? 1958. Yes. And then we got these idiots, these numbskulls in Canberra, toing and froing about, oh, it's too risky. Like letting the lights go out ain't risky. God help us. The First Crusade begins in 1099. Little teach me not to bring my glasses down. 1955, Neil Armstrong, scientist student, later astronaut Neil Armstrong, marries fellow student Janet Elizabeth Sharon in Illinois on this day in 1956. Welsh pirate Henry Morgan captures Panama City from the Spanish defenders in 1871. Welsh pirate. Why didn't he keep it, I wonder? Been a bloody good idea. Alan Alda, American Emmy Award-winning actor and director, MASH, Captain Hawkeye. Hawkeye Pierce, yeah. West Wing, he was in that as well. Born in New York City on this day in 1938. Horace Walpole, in a letter to Horace Mann, coins the word serendipity. It's a good word, serendipity. Horace, you don't find many Horaces around these days. There was another Horace who was pretty famous, Horace Greeley, who wrote that incredibly impressive front page story in the New York Times, which had a headline that said, "Go west, young man." And they all did. The beginning of America, the birth of America as we know it today. The Goon Show's final episode on BBC Radio, believe it or not, way back on this day in 1960. And people still talk about the Goons. Francis Drake, English pirate. He was also an admiral and a governor of Newfoundland. He dies of dysentery at the age of 50 in 1596. Sir Francis Drake. I never knew he was a pirate. Nicholas Sarkozy, 1955, 23rd President of France, born in Paris on this day. Bugsy Siegel, the mobster, 23, weds a childhood sweetheart, Esther Trackover. Interesting name. 1929. I mean, would you marry a man called Bugsy? You sort of know something was a bit wrong, wouldn't you? Bugsy Siegel. Bugsy Siegel. Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice is published by Thomas Egerton on this day in 1813 in the United Kingdom. Beverly Hills, California is incorporated. 1914, so there was no Beverly Hills before this day in 1914. That's interesting. 1914. Originally, it was orchards. And that sign that is so famous, the Hollywood sign, there was another bit to it that got discarded after a while, which was Hollywood Estate. So they got rid of the estate, I suppose, when it was all sold. But it was a real estate development, not a movie place. Golly, I think I'll leave it there. One more, very important one. Elvis Presley's first appearance on national television on the Dorsey Brothers stage show on this day in 1956. And we still love Elvis Presley. We do. Thank you very much for being with us. I hope I didn't get too heated. I hope I didn't annoy... Well, that's not true. Perhaps I do hope I annoyed some people, because that's kind of my job. Thank you for being with us. I look forward to posting on Facebook next Tuesday. And of course, coming up on the 7th, we'll be back live streaming jeremycordeaux.com around the dining room table. Believe in yourself. Peter Clayton will be back with me behind the camera. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Believe in yourself, and goodbye for now.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.